This presentation discusses HIPAA compliance for small organizations. Together with software from ACR and support from Compliance Helper, these videos describe a comprehensive program for HIPAA compliance for small organizations. There are currently 5 videos in this series, with others planned to follow. The HIPAA security rule requirements are straightforward. Organizations are required to maintain reasonable and appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to protect against reasonably anticipated threats or hazards. The updated HIPAA security rule explicitly states that covered entities and business associates have the flexibility to choose security measures appropriate for their size, resources, and the nature of the security risks they face. There are several protocols that define reasonable and appropriate safeguards, including NIST, ISO, COBIT, and DIACAP. However, all federal agencies, including HHS auditors under HIPAA, are required by law to use the NIST protocols. While NIST 800-66 and its associated references are well written and extensively documented, they are not user-friendly in their raw form. While hospitals and large practices can hire expensive experts to apply these protocols in their original form, such expensive expertise is largely out of the budget for small groups. ACR and Compliance Helper have extensively interpreted and simplified these procedures to make them practically accessible to small organizations. There are 101 possible safeguards for HIPAA-regulated organizations under NIST 800-66. Not all of these are reasonable for all organizations. The current version of the HIPAA security rule, page 5589, explicitly states that appropriate depends on the size and resources of the organization. HIPAA security rule compliance using the NIST standards is a cyclical process. The overall cycle of 11 tasks is shown here. For convenience, the more or less annual cycle has been divided into 4 quarters. A given set of tasks may take more or less time than this, depending on the complexity of the situation and available resources. Safeguard status may be yes, yes alt, no, or NA. Yes means the safeguard is in place and working effectively. Yes alt means the safeguard is being met using a compensating control. NA means the safeguard is not reasonable and appropriate for this location. No means the safeguard is reasonable and appropriate, but is not in place or is not working effectively, or has not been updated according to schedule. Using this online form, the client may designate the not appropriate, or NA, status and justification for each safeguard declined. More than 40 NIST safeguards may be NA, depending on the size, complexity, and details of a particular organization. The most recent NA status form is available online at the link shown. You can pause the video, copy the link, and paste it into a browser. You may also request a copy of the NA status form from your vendor. There are 4 basic HHS accepted reasons for a safeguard to be not applicable to a given organization. The organization may be too small, the organization may not have the resources to manage the cost or complexity of the safeguard, or the organization may be using an alternate solution. The following pages review more than 40 of the 101 safeguards that may be NA for a small organization, along with a summary of possible NA justifications. Please note that the particular NA justification for safeguard must be selected by the client, since the contractor will not have that information. The AC1 policy safeguard is meant to coordinate practices across a complex organization. A formal policy to deal with coordination of multiple entities is usually less than reasonable and appropriate in a small organization where there typically are no other entities with which to coordinate. When there is only one information system, there is no interflow between systems to control. More complex systems should have this as a moderate safeguard rather than NA. Session control should be enabled if available, but need not be specially installed. Many software packages have no sessions in their structure. This is very site specific. Automated marking can be useful if there's a large variety of places for distribution of output, but typically it's unnecessary in a small organization. When there are a few places for information to go, automated labeling is not needed and manually labeling is quite adequate. If there are no portable, i.e. easily stolen, or mobile devices allowed in a small organization, this precaution is not needed. If mobile devices are allowed, which is not recommended unless they're fully encrypted, this safeguard becomes one of the moderate precautions and should be dealt with in the moderate section of the policy creation procedure. This policy safeguard is meant to coordinate security awareness practices across a large organization. A formal policy to deal with coordination of multiple entities is less than reasonable and appropriate in a small organization where there are typically no other entities with which to coordinate. This policy safeguard is meant to coordinate auditing practices across a large organization. A formal policy to deal with coordination of multiple entities is not reasonable and appropriate in a small organization when there are no other entities with which to coordinate. Formal certification policies are typically not appropriate for a very small organization. Small organizations typically only need to assess their security controls when significant changes in equipment or procedures are planned. A security assessment takes skills and experience that are not available to most small organizations. Guidance includes NIST 800-17, -20, -22, -23, -26, 800-35, -36, -37, 53A, 55, 66, 76, and 800-79. Any assessment of security controls for a small organization should be done by an outside expert when the controls are set up. A small organization will typically not have this expertise in-house. Security accreditation is useful for large organizations, but is typically overkill for small groups. Small organizations typically do not have the resources for full-time security staff. The small amount of components, if any, kept by small sites does not typically merit a sophisticated inventory. A list of devices with EPHI should be kept by the compliance officer. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. Typically, small organization access control uses individual authentication rather than the more complex and expensive device authentication for internal devices. External devices are controlled by the firewall or IPS. A small organization does not typically need a complex authenticator management system. This policy safeguard is meant to coordinate policies across an entire organization, is only for multiple entities which don't exist in a small shop. This policy safeguard is meant to coordinate practices across a large organization and is typically not practical for a small group. Small organization maintenance is typically as needed rather than periodically maintained. Maintenance is typically incident-based rather than schedule-based. A small organization will not have enough devices for statistical prediction of repair events. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. For small organizations, a locked container with restricted access is usually sufficient. When there are few possible recipients, extensive labeling is unnecessary. Media transport in a small organization should be a rare event. Unless the organization has many visitors for some reason, such as an active medical practice, an extensive access log is unnecessary and can be replaced with a simple calendar or schedule. Groups with electronic medical record systems should have options for alternate work sites. Other small organizations will probably find this safeguard not reasonable due to size. A small organization will typically have few options on location of information system components. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. A formal security plan is typically overkill for a small organization which does not have layers of officials. Typically, a small organization will not have a formal security plan to update. Security-related activity should be minimal for a small organization, except for the mandatory awareness training. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. Typically, a small organization will only have one or two position designations. For a single site organization, there is no place to transfer people to. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. Typically, there will be only one level of security in a small organization. A formal acquisition policy is not typical for a small location. Checksum and other document checking protocols are not typically available to small organizations, but may be provided by their ISP. Automated cryptography is not typically available to small sites who rely on outside experts for this service. This capability is typically beyond the technical reach of small organizations. This policy is designed to coordinate across an organization with multiple entities. Typically, these do not exist in a small site. While apparently complex, the only real requirements under the HIPAA security rule are to have reasonable and appropriate precautions that are sized to the size and complexity and resources of the organization. A common risk assessment summary for a small site after inputting NA determinations will look something like this. For more information, contact your testing manager or one of the individuals shown on this slide. Thank you for viewing our tutorial.